10 years or so ago, families came to me for private help. And as an attorney, I was shocked at what I was seeing. The lack of due process, the lack of candor, the gross inaccuracies in reports that were impacting families as the department was trying to push some towards severance blew my mind. I thought, what's going on here? So I started helping families.
Hello, and welcome to the Attorney Post, your guide to the inside scoop when it comes to all things legal. And now, here's our host, Justin West.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Attorney Post, where we discuss what's going on in various facets of the law with lawyers at the top of their game to help you navigate the ins and outs of the various legal fields and jurisdictions. Because, as I always say, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Today, I am pleased to be joined with DeeAn Gillespie Strub. I think I said her name correctly. I was panicking about that. All right, I got it right. Bonus points for me.
Yep.
She is the chief cook and bottle washer over there at Gillespie Shields Law, which is a family law firm out in the Arizona area. And I'm going to jump over here really quickly so you guys can see her website. I am assuming you're seeing the right window here. There we go. And you can, as always, visit her down below. We'll have a link to her website. It is just GillespieShields.com. In the Phoenix area, in the Mesa area, she does have phone numbers. We'll have those in the box below as well. Before we get started, as always, we're going to jump over and read from a couple of sponsors. Our first sponsor today is National ERC. You may have noticed that the world went through a pandemic and many businesses were forced to shut down and reduce their hours, had supply chain interruptions, and ultimately suffered from reduced revenue in 2020 and 2021. What you may not know is that Congress recently passed the CARES Act, which allocated $400 billion in stimulus funds for small businesses that never needs to be paid back. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. This is free money for your business that can be spent in whatever way you think makes sense right now. And right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate. Oh, I bumped the whole thing. There you go. You can see the whole website. There's a lot of information there. This is not a loan like the PPP or Paycheck Protection Program. It's free money for your business that can be spent as you see fit. Right now, nationalerc.org is helping small businesses get the maximum amount of money that they can, and you can calculate and see how much money you could get by visiting nationalerc.org. The average small business that they work with will get over $200,000 to reinvest in their business, and that's, again, money that never needs to be paid back. The calculator is free, and there's never any fee unless they are successful in securing funding for you. Visit nationalerc.org. Our second sponsor at the top is Groove Pages, or Groove Funnels, whatever you want to call them, groove.cm. If you love spending $5,000 to build a new website and you love paying monthly hosting fees north of $100 a month for a platform that allows you to sell products on to your potential clients and customers, then by all means keep doing whatever it is that you're doing. But if you're like me, you hate that stuff. And that's why I personally recommend Groove Pages, the all-new, all-in-one website funnel sales platform from internet marketing legend Mike Filsame. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to sign up for free and build a complete site at no cost. Really free. There's literally no cost, and you can build, actually, I believe, up to 3 fully functioning websites at theattorneypost.com/groove. They have a huge list of apps for the platform that'll turn it into a webinar platform, sales funnel platform, website, and blog, as well as an affiliate platform, or almost anything else you can imagine. Visit theattorneypost.com/groove to get started today. And yes, it really is free. No credit card is needed. That's theattorneypost.com/groove. All righty. And we are back here with DeeAn at Gillespie Shields. DeeAn is the founder, owner, and a family law attorney, of course, at Gillespie Shields Law. She's a caring, courageous, and confident attorney who's dedicated her life to making a difference for people and families. She grew up as the oldest of 9 children. She quickly learned leadership roles and resourcefulness. And with both parents as educators, she required a love of learning and thinking analytically. DeeAn graduated from Brigham Young University in 1984 and founded Gillespie Shields Law in Arizona, where she has risen to the top of her profession, receiving several awards and serving as both an instructor and a guest lecturer for many law topics. She's also co-owner of a premier art gallery in Scottsdale, Arizona, called the Marshall Gallery. DeeAn is known for her compassion and dogged determination on behalf of her clients, making her a rare breed of an attorney who deeply cares and has the courage and competence to make a difference in the world. So, welcome to the podcast, DeeAn. How you doing?
Thank you. That was quite a mouthful.
Sometimes it really is, but that's life. Sometimes I let my mouth get in front of me too. Well, DeeAn, question number one I always like to ask is just, what did I miss? I mean, obviously, in that little tiny introduction, I can only include so much. So just give our listeners a little bit of a peek inside of who you really are.
Well, I am. Gee, that's a big question.
Oh, I stumped her already. Sweet.
I love what I do. I really love to help people. And I think I decided to come into this path of the law because I felt like it would give me a platform to have a broader influence and to be able to affect change on a bigger scale. And I found that to be true. I found that a law license has given me, has leveraged my ability to help make some fundamental changes for people in their lives, to help advocate for them, and to have a voice that helps smooth out rough spaces for people. I think of families, and I could never be a doctor because I don't. But I can do quite well with people who have difficulties, and people that come to me are often like people that need to go to the ER, but they come to the legal ER because they need help sorting out and getting to a sane place and a place where there are no surprises, where they can comfortably move forward with their lives. And I think I'm pretty good at unraveling big knots and helping families get to a better place.
All right. I'm having just a little bit of issue with the audio all of a sudden. It's kind of
okay. Can you hear me?
Oh, there we go. That's much better.
Okay.
I could hear everything, but every so often it was just getting really, really quiet. So
all right,
talking to Mike.
I'll try and speak in this microphone.
That's totally fine. I could hear you. I could hear everything you said. There's a couple of points where it was low, but that's totally fine.
All right.
So, DeeAn, professional, not untire.
Sure.
Give me your pitch, right? If you and I were in an elevator and I just asked you, had no clue who you are, and said, "What do you do?" Tell me a little bit about your firm. Who are your principal clients, clientele? What's the main service or services that you do? Tell me about your law firm.
Well, we have a law firm with multi-practice areas, and I have the blessing of coming to work and working alongside professionals whom I respect. So we help people in various areas of the law. We have an attorney who is from Milan, Italy, who helps people do interesting things and get to the United States and maybe do businesses here. He also does employment work. I have a good friend who works with me, Wayne Taylor, who helps people and families at end of life with probate administration and trust administration. He helps sort things out when it's time for the next generation to be in charge. And I also have the blessing of working with other bright attorneys, family law attorneys that I enjoy working with as we help families. If a family has a problem that involves legal issues, our firm is available to help them. And in particular, I have a team under roof. As I have developed my practice, I'm actually in my 68th year of Planet Time, and my 30 some odd year of legal practice. I have found myself drawn to try and help families who've been caught up in some government overreach with the Department of Child Safety. And that's a big challenge, but we're on it and we're enjoying what we're doing.
Fascinating. We're going to probably dig into that topic a little bit later because we had a little bit of pre-discussion a few days ago, and I really enjoyed just kind of beginning to peer into what you're doing there. So I will come back to that topic in a little bit. Congratulations on your 68th consecutive postnatal revolution, about a futile ball of helium. It's exciting. It's big stuff.
Life is great, and the best is yet to come.
I hope so. I hope for all of us. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and again, we just got through with, a couple of years of kind of down in the dump stuff. So it's all looking bright. So speaking of that, that's actually a nice little transition point. Obviously, we just got through with a pandemic, and hopefully we're actually through with it, right? And certain people in certain areas. I talk to attorneys all over the country, people in California, people in Florida, people in Texas, people in Maine, just everywhere. And a lot of people have very different experiences of how the law changed during the dark times, during the COVID, right? How did the pandemic affect you and your firm at all? Did it affect the way that you handled your clients and interface with them? Did it affect the way you interfaced with the courts? Did it, decrease your reach? Did it increase your reach? Did you have more people coming to you because the pandemic drove everybody crazy? What was your experience of the pandemic in your firm?
Well, it's a multifaceted question. Let me see if I can unpack it a bit at a time. One thing that's changed, and I think this is for many people, is we do many more things virtually than we did. We learned that we can accomplish things without having to get in the car and drive. So as it relates to clients, pardon me, let me mute that. As it relates to clients, we can do Zoom meetings with clients. We do Zoom meetings with our staff. On this DCS matter, we have team meetings periodically, and they'll be on Zoom. I never would have imagined doing that before the pandemic. We have hearings, and many courts are continuing to have short hearings virtually. And that is good for clients because it saves attorney travel time, and it helps things to get very consolidated. And in the past, you might do a short telephonic hearing, but how nice to see faces and how nice to be able to have a platform. And I think that the world kind of opened up in one of the things the shutdown of COVID did was opening up other opportunities.
Absolutely. I don't know if you've some of my listeners want to say I mention this periodically throughout the show. But I used to run this podcast, and then I kind of shut it down because it was built on the Google Hangouts platform back when that was a thing. And I always had to talk people through, this is how you install Hangouts and this is where you go. And it was a nightmare. And I kind of let the podcast go by the wayside until the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, attorneys knew how to Zoom. Like, I didn't have to explain to them, there's this new software. And yeah, I know it's got ties to China, but it's probably safe to put on your computer. Everyone just instinctively got it. And so it really relaunched the podcast, which is kind of fun because it had been languishing for quite some time. And now it's become a very regular thing. And we're getting lots of listeners and viewership and everything else. So it is neat to see. Do you think some of the big changes that happened, do you think they're going to stay? Like, that'll be the new status quo? Or do you think people are going to go back to the old analog ways?
Zoom's not going away. The efficiencies of electronic meetings is not going away. Another change that I hadn't mentioned before is virtual workers. I had a paralegal that works with me that did work somewhat remotely previously, and I'd done some of that, but we do more of that now. And we've just learned that remote working or mixed remote working can work. And it's here to stay in some manner, some hybrid manner. It's here to stay. It's expanded our options. It's expanded our opportunities. It's expanded our efficiencies.
Gotcha. No, I agree with that 100%. And I actually use a little bit of remote work in what I do as well with people I have doing, writing and video editing and stuff like that. So 100%, I'm fully on board with the concept of remote working. Well, let me ask you this then, DeeAn. What got you into law? Were you the little girl growing up who just always knew you were going to be a lawyer? Did you watch, Matlock or Perry Mason? I don't remember what the legal shows were back in the 70s and 80s, even though I grew up in that era, but I was very young then. Did you always know you wanted to be an attorney, or is this something that you went through a series of life experiences before you found out, this is what I think I'm called to do? What got you into being an attorney, and specifically then what got you into family law?
Well, that's an interesting question too, and I'll give you kind of the short version. I did see Perry Mason as a kid, but I never imagined myself as an attorney. I really didn't imagine myself what I was going to be when I grew up, other than life was going to be good. As I said, as you said, I come from a large family. My parents were teachers. They thought the ideal job was to be a school teacher, and I have a lot of respect for them because they are magnificent educators. My father taught junior high mathematics. My mother taught first and second graders to read. Lots of people are better off in the world because of them. But I went to college and explored different options. My parents blessed me with an inquisitive mind, and I couldn't settle on anything. So once I thought I wanted to be into theater, I went to New York when I was 21. I was going to take some acting classes. I took some speech classes. I just explored a lot of different turf and thought I would go into graduate school for organizational behavior and prepared a degree, cobbled together all the things I'd done, and graduated. Then I managed a restaurant for a year because I'd put my way through school in the restaurant industry as a waitress and managing a restaurant for a while. And then one day in the fall, after I'd never had difficulty finding work. One thing that I was resourceful. Well, I had a layoff and I couldn't find a job. And I felt very prompted that I needed to get a teaching certificate. And I thought, what? I was never going to do that. But I followed that prompting, marched myself up to the university. It was on the semester block, got a job as a graduate assistant, and the classes fell into place and I loved them. So here I was on the path to getting a teaching certificate. In the middle of that, I played hooky one day from school and went to my widowed uncle's house where I stored some boxes. He had a big garden with an artesian well. And I started going through the boxes and I saw a notebook. It was my handwriting and it said, how to go to law school. And I said, when did I write that? Well, I must have written that in the statistics class when Bob DeWitt was going to go to law school. So I had friends that were going to law school. And I thought, what if I did this? I won't tell anyone. They won't think I'm smart enough to do it. But I took the LSAT, took it a second time, applied to law school while I was getting my teaching certificate, and got admitted. I still didn't know what I was going to do when I grew up to be an attorney. I was just in law school. I had a marvelous time in law school. It was life-changing. And when I got out, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I found myself, after a period of time, hanging my own shingle with a contract doing juvenile work. And my great-granddad, John Henry Durant, who had the first gas station in Provo, Utah, said, you don't go into business, you grow into business. And that's exactly what happened for me. A few years into my practice, I spoke with one of my law school colleagues, Natasha Matkin. I told her I was working on a variety of cases and I was doing some family law stuff. And she said, I think you would be good at that. And I had a lot of respect for Natasha and I started focusing on family law along with the juvenile work and just grew into that area of the practice and found that because of my life experiences and because of growing up in a large family, I had a very high tolerance for ambiguity. And I had a really good analytical mind for problem solving and resourcefulness. And that was a good skill set that served me well as I sought to help people with their family law problems. And I have people that come back to me 20 years later or refer other people to me. And I can't really remember a lot of those cases in the early days, but people will refer others because I believe that they feel like they were served well in a time of need. And I take great pleasure in helping my clients get to higher ground.
Okay. It's a very good answer. And I like that. I like the journey. You meet all kinds of people. And, I'm the type of person, I work with attorneys all the time. And I do that because I've always had an affinity for law. I was the kid that used to take the LSAT practice test just because I thought it was fun. I never actually took the formal one, but I loved the logic questions. You're sitting in a roller coaster seat and the person 3 seats in front of you on the left doesn't like mustard, but has a red hat on and those sorts of questions. I thought they were just absolutely a blast to try and puzzle those out. So maybe one of my kids will wind up in law school. Who knows? So you started doing family law, and I talked to lawyers all over the place in all different fields. And there's certain fields I think I could do. Honestly, I think I could do personal injury law. I feel like I would find that kind of fun and rewarding. And I know that there's a lot of money to be made. And there's certain aspects of law I feel like I couldn't do. I don't think I could do like just contract law. I think that would drive me nuts personally. But I just don't have a mind for that.
A little dry.
But sometimes I wonder about family law. Like I feel like you must have a lot of patience because I'm sure you deal with rough scenarios, rough situations. Tough family situations. What would you say, DeeAn, what are some of the biggest or toughest parts of what you do? And also, what do you think is some of the most important work that you've done dealing with these tough situations?
Well, one of the things that I came to realize early on is Short of the IRS, the most damage that can be done to an
Happy
individual.
tax day, by the way.
Oh, thank you. That is today. Is through a spouse. I mean, so much damage can be done. And that, so it's a tender time and a tender situation. And children, what's more important to any individual other than children, right? It's not always just about splitting up the money and doing what's fair or making sure that there's resources that people can get on their way in the right way down the road. Children and family and emotions are involved. And some of the biggest struggles I've had is when people want to hold anger or hurt and they want to stay in the past. And that's a difficult person to help. But if somebody is here truly wanting help and they will take some guidance, and I've sometimes referred my clients to get some mental health counseling where they're going through these times so that they can also have the headspace to focus on the legal stuff. If you love people and you love to help and you know your craft, you can do some pretty magical things, and it's quite rewarding.
It's a good answer. Now, I know that you've dealt with, and in fact, it sounds like later in your practice, you really started to shift some of your particular focus to dealing with certain federal child cases where the state comes in, the government comes in and takes over and removes children from the care of their family. And this seems to be something that you're very, very passionate about. And I have to say, if I was in your shoes, I feel like it would be something I would be very passionate about too. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in that? How does that come about? What are the scenarios that lead to this? How can my listeners prevent it from happening?
Good point. Thanks for the question and the opportunity to get on my soapbox.
Oh, there you go.
In Arizona, there is a $1 billion budget a year for the Department of Child Safety. Those funds could do great good, or they can be misused. 60% of those funds come from the federal government. When I first started working in the juvenile court in the 80s, I had no concerns about what was going on. I didn't feel like anything was mismanaged. It was not as profound and broad as it is now. I felt like the children who were in the system, that the families were truly being helped. As my practice grew and I dropped the juvenile contract about 10 years into my practice in the 90s, started doing a lot of other stuff. Maybe 10 years or so ago, families came to me for private help. And as an attorney, I was shocked at what I was seeing. The lack of due process, the lack of candor, the gross inaccuracies in reports that were impacting families as the department was trying to push some towards severance blew my mind. I thought, what's going on here? So I started helping families. I started paying attention, and I went to some national conventions. The American Bar Association puts on a national convention in Tyson's Corner in April, and they do it every other year. And the pandemic hit and did a virtual one, had one this past April. And I was able to gather with hundreds of other like-minded people, and I began to learn some things. In the 90s, the federal government instituted the Safe Families Act, which was intended to help. But listen to this. The federal government gives money to states, well intended, for children who are in out-of-home care. What might that incentivize? Unnecessary removals? And when you have a government bureaucracy managing the removal of children, we have some great laws in Arizona, and when they're not followed, disasters happen. In Title 8, it says, respect due process. In Title 8, that's the Arizona title for child welfare, it says, man, if you get a hotline call, you better do a thorough investigation, and you better consider the things that might refute the concern. Those are the fail points. Also, there's a cloak that they hide errors behind called confidentiality. And that might butt up against the First Amendment. because what happens in juvenile court stays in juvenile court. Why aren't you hearing about this? Because every family that goes into juvenile court hears the judge say at almost every hearing, these proceedings are confidential. So in the name of protecting the children's confidentiality, parents who feel like the system is getting it wrong don't have a platform. They feel they don't have a platform to discuss it. Why doesn't the public know? Because parents are silenced. What's happening? Well, in Arizona, we had a courageous Arizona Supreme Court Justice Bullock, a few years ago in the Alma S case, in his dissent, raised some alarm. The severance rate in Arizona, if the state decides to sever parental rights, that means forever gone, like it's death. You're gone. You're dead to your kids. And your kids are dead to their heritage, is 99.9 something percent.
Oh, wow.
That statistics in and of itself should alarm you. And it alarmed Justice Bullock. And so he put it in writing in his dissent. And what's happening is there is not enough light shined on how that $1 billion a year is spent. You get into the land of the Department of Child Safety, you have an implicit bias that someone protecting children could do no wrong. And if they make an error, they don't know how to say whoops. They use some of that $1 billion to justify what they're doing. My experience has been on numerous families that I've helped, as we get in there and there's a false narrative that started the wrongful removal, they will move along and say, the parents, because they didn't follow the law, they didn't do a thorough investigation, they will move forward and say, the parents are not accepting responsibility for the reason their children came into care. If they can't accept responsibility, in other words, swallow their false narrative, we're going to have to move towards severance because these children won't be safe unless the parents accept the reasons the kids came into care. I have some of those statistics for non-severances are mine. I helped one mother who had 2 sets of twins after 20 days of a year of a severance trial not be severed. And what I saw along the lines was not pretty. And it was alarming. I'm not going to give a name, but so what we've done is I've got other like-minded attorneys in one area to try and effectuate some reform. We're bringing civil rights actions when the facts warrant it in the federal court to bring some accountability. Because when you're dealing with families, you should have transparency and accountability and oversight. They're lacking. About a year ago, we reached a settlement in a case for a family, and the Arizona legislature approved $1 million for a family. It wasn't enough, but they had removed a little girl and she was away from her mother for 3 years, and they removed her siblings, and they really shouldn't have even been involved in that family. Imagine what that does to a child being removed at age 3 until age 6 and not being able to see your mother for a long period of time and having a false narrative perpetuated. It's tragic. It's just tragic.
My
So
youngest.
that's what I'm doing.
My youngest is 4, and the idea of her being taken away for even a couple of weeks is absolutely just nauseating. So to think about it for 2 or 3 years with no contact, I mean, you'd be a stranger to your own child at that point.
That was one of the cases where they said she's refusing to accept responsibility for the reason her child came into care. They had a child interview when this child was taken into care. She said she got the bruise on her head from her sister. She told them what happened, and it morphed into this whole thing that the stepfather must be abusive. And when she would see her mother, and they had an agenda, that little girl was going to be adopted by the 2 mommies she was placed with. That was their agenda, right? And she ultimately got moved out of that home when the judge saw that that was an unhealthy placement. And that little girl actually ended up in the mental hospital for a period of time, and they wouldn't let her see her mommy when she was in the mental hospital.
Wow.
Because her mom was the problem and wasn't accepting response. The whole thing was such there's a word and I'm not going to say it.
Rhymes with bluster duck or something like that.
Something.
So
it's just shameful that our tax dollars are going to damage families in the name of Department of Child Safety. You know, there's a really great group of professionals, the national experts, and I cannot remember their name. I wish I had it right now, but they have a platform, and one of their positions is they really should be called the Department of Family Regulators, because they act more like a policing agency than they do to truly help. Because naming them the Department of Child Safety gives too much implicit bias that they have the right motives. The Department of Family Regulators, much better title.
Gotcha. Let me ask you this though. Cui bono, right? There's $1 billion
Yeah.
in play and it's going somewhere. Is this just a case of bureaucracy run amok? Is this people getting inside the system, stealing children? I mean, you mentioned, I don't want to get too far down the political aspect. You're welcome to go as far as you want. I intentionally try and keep, for the sake of my guests,
Right.
politics as far out of it as possible, but you're welcome to go as far into politics as you want. But you gave an example of a little girl placed with, you said, 2 mommies. And you know, was it these people who brought up hey, this little girl, she has bruises, and if they're successful in getting her, they also get money? Where does this money go? Like, I have more questions than I can even fathom with how frustrating this scenario is.
This is a series for a podcast. This is a series for a podcast. You know, the money is not well managed, and the money goes to service.
What? Government funds not managed? Get out of here. You're pulling my leg. Happy tax day again.
Indeed. The money is not well managed. Service providers, so the department controls the money, controls where it's spent. Not enough is spent on defense counsel for parents. There are service providers, psychologists, and others. Some do a great job. Some do a great service to these children and to these families. Some figure out which way the wind is blowing and always please the department and turn a blind eye to things that would help sort out the truth. And that is tragic. These are hard cases. These are hard cases. You know, the Department of Child Safety must be involved for a reason. You really have to turn on your critical thinking, and there's not enough leadership with high-level critical thinking that understands what the law says and trains to the law, and also trains their people to know and understand it is an incredible trauma to remove a child from a family. And you only do that as a last resort. Yeah. Only. Once having made that decision to remove a child or children from a family, be careful to always double check to see if you made the right decision. Because if you simply now start using all the government resources to justify a decision that was traumatic, and what I find, unfortunately, too much of the time is an inability to correct course. They just pile on and justify each other.
And so we're not talking about even like temporary foster care and then back to the parents, because you're talking about actual severance. And do these go to severance more often than not, or are those
Okay, I represented a mother with a low IQ, and she had a little boy and her mom was helping her raise him, and the department got involved. She had allowed herself to go to a party and ingest something she shouldn't have because of a boyfriend, and the boyfriend threatened her. Anyway, I'm not going to get into much of the facts. The long and the short of this is there's a published case in Arizona about this, Jessica P. It's a published case. I can talk about Jessica P. That's our published case. Jessica P. says you have to apply DDD factors. You have to apply disability factors to parents when you're dealing with parents with a disability. They severed her rights to her little boy, and there's still some litigation about that, but they severed her rights because she had a low IQ. They didn't do I'm not going to talk too much about the facts, but do you sever parental rights of a mother when she has extended family help and loves her child, when her job at the time of the severance trial is taking care of an autistic child and living independently? That was her job. Could she not care for her own flesh and blood with her extended family? Yeah, okay. Think for yourself. Is that an outcome that we should have allowed to happen with part of that $1 billion?
Yeah, this could be a mini podcast series of its own. Let me put that bug in your ear and make that suggestion to you, regardless of
I've
whatever else
thought I need to
happens
do it.
us.
Now, there are a couple of really good books out. DeeAn Redleaf, who's an attorney in Chicago who works in this space, wrote a book called They Took the Kids Last Night. It's an
I
excellent
know
book.
that story. I know that book.
It's a very good book, and there's six stories, true stories, heavily footnoted. She gives you the blow by blow. You live through it. It's wonderful. It's very well crafted. There's another attorney by the name of Beth Mahoney who works in this space, and during COVID, she wrote a book entitled Protecting Your Child from the Child Protective System. It's an excellent book. Beth represents a lot of parents when the medical profession gets it wrong and they try and blame the parent and they get it wrong. So she gives some real practical how-tos, how not to get reactive, how to deal with the department, how to know where they're coming from, and how to protect your children from the Department of Child Safety.
Well, that's a couple of resources, and if I think about it, I might even link those down below in the show notes for people, because those sound like a good read. I've heard of both those names, and it may have just been our conversation we had a week or so back. But when you said DeeAn Redleaf, I was like, I know that name, and then the Took the Kids Last Night, like that book rang a sudden bell. But it may have just been we had discussed this before, because I can't picture the book in my head, but that's still like the whole scenario is just terrifying. I've
been urged to write a book, and I've conceived of a title, and my good friend and colleague, Sandra Dawson, threatened she's going to help me co-author it. Something like this. The grave harm, families matter. The grave harm done when the Department of Child Safety gets it wrong. And then do some case-by-case scenarios of where they just got the train out of the station on the wrong track and couldn't get it back on the right track, to the detriment of children, to the detriment of families. You know, this has societal impact. When you sever parental rights and those kids don't get adopted, one of the things I learned back at the ABA conference is you make legal orphans and they high proportionate age out into homelessness. Now, how are we helping our society when we create those kinds of things and we don't think long term? Let's get them into independent living. We can help them till they're 21. What then?
Yeah.
Where are their roots? Where are their roots? I'm looking at a board for one of my we have a case called Aaron W. It's not a published case, but the court in that quoted a case called Donald W., which was posted, and it says this: a child is not entitled to a perfect parent or even a good one. What a child is entitled to is a parent that doesn't engage in conduct that's unlawful, or to abuse or to neglect a child in violation of the laws of this state. We recognize that a parent has an inalienable right to parent his or her child without obstruction or interference from the state. They need to recognize that more often. They need to remember that. They need to teach it, train it, apply it.
I would say you're preaching to the choir here. I'm a libertarian at heart, and I'm a firm believer the government that governs best is the government that governs least. You know, is that Franklin or Jefferson who said that? But yeah, and anytime it comes to the government stepping in between parents and their children without grave reason, I think it's an overstep almost every single time. So 100%, you're preaching to the choir here.
Justin, what I'm seeing too often, they substitute themselves in for the parent, then they drop the ball, and the kids are far worse off. Hello, if you're going to do it better. Not happening.
Well, and it's just so easy because you're too far. It's the same reason. It's the same thing ultimately that is the problem with government misspending of funds, right? If it's your own money and you're investing it in something, you think long and hard about what you're going to buy. You know, if it's somebody else's money, you know, and it's for a friend or something, you might think a little bit about it, but you're less concerned about price and everything else. But if it's somebody else's money and you're spending on somebody else you don't even know, and you're just like, whatever, just spend it, right? You don't even care. And I have to imagine it's at least in part the same with children. The person closer to the situation is always going to have a much more vested interest in the outcomes. So whether it's managing your own personal finances or your own household, your own children, the subsidiarity, right? The people closest to the scenario are the people that are almost always going to be best able to handle it. And if you throw it off into a third, fourth, fifth party bureaucracy, you're never going to have a good outcome.
Justin, you remind me of a footnote in a law review article published in a Harvard Law Review written by Bruce Hafen, who was a teacher that taught me a class in law school. And Bruce was talking about the importance, Professor Hafen was talking about the importance of why the governments should protect families. And the footnote highlighted the fact that you cannot pay a care facility or any third care provider to love children the way parents love children. And parents necessarily weather all kinds of storms raising children. And to your point, you can't replicate a parent. You can't replicate their core dedication to their children. Yeah, in our society, there are some that don't care that much, and that's where those children need to be protected. But there are too many children that have loving parents that care about them, that could use some help, don't need to be separated from their kids. And the kids don't need to be separated from the parents and the extended family.
Amen. Amen. Well, I think we could go down that rabbit hole for another 30 minutes easily, but I'll change the topic now because I know that you have a business to run, and I'm sure you didn't clear your entire afternoon just to talk about this. Though
I'll tell you what we have today, Jason. We have a company called Obligados Now here doing some videos in our firm today because we're going to start marketing to the Hispanic community. I'm not a language gal. I wish I could have multilingual. I'm not, but I have people that work with me that are, and we want to serve the Spanish community, and we're going to start marketing to the Spanish community.
There you go. Se habla español. I think that was correct. I don't know. I only speak English and bad English. So I can pick my way through Greek. I took Japanese, I took Latin, I took French for reading, and I can basically insult your mother and suggest we have some coffee together in all of those languages. And that's about it. So not the most useful skills in life, but that is what it is. Well, let's go. Let's step off on another foot here for a minute.
Sure.
And maybe lighten the conversation a little bit, or maybe not, depending.
Indeed. Come on, Justin. Have some fun.
I am sure in your experience as an attorney, you've had some ups and you've had some downs. I'm sure you've had some wins and you've had some losses. I'm a firm believer, DeeAn, that a failure is never really a failure as long as you learn from it. Obviously, I mean, it hurts in the moment, and hopefully it doesn't separate families in the process with a failure. But I'm sure that you've had a couple times in your law career where you've had what you would consider to be a failure, but you learned something from it. So can you share with our listeners maybe, one of those, and again, it takes a little bit of self-effacement, right? To be able to admit our own humble failings, but tell us about a time in your practice of law when you had a setback or you had a failure, and what you learned from it and how you carry that forward to take care of your clients.
Well, early in my practice, I remember a person coming into me who had an issue. I don't think this was a family law matter. I think it was a civil matter. And I listened to him, and rationally, everything made sense. My gut said, ooh, caution. And as we moved along and as I advocated for that client, I later saw where there was some deception. And the lesson learned from that is trust your gut, because my intellect was saying what he's saying makes sense. Something was telling me this isn't quite right. And it took getting into the litigation, sitting in opposing counsel's office with opposing counsel, bringing to my attention what was wrong to say, man, I'm out of here. And so, and I reflected in that moment, and I reflected back to how I felt in that initial consult. And I said, ooh, trust your gut. So that was one. And another one, we helped a young lady some years ago. A police officer had been naughty. She was 18 years old. And there was a stop and some inappropriate things happened. And I felt really strongly that what happened was wrong. And the jury found in our favor too. But I recognized that we pled too broadly and too many things, and sometimes less is more. And I learned from that experience that the jury wanted to find from her, but we gave them too many options, and it was somewhat confusing. So, sometimes less is more. to make your point. You need to get in there what needs to be there, but sometimes less is more.
I agree with that 100%. I mean, what's the phrase? You can't chase two rabbits, or a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? If you're going after too many different things,
Right.
or even in sales, the confused mind never buys. There's studies about whether an entire shelf full of laundry detergent actually makes people happier and better shoppers. Apparently, it does not, but it's kind of the same general function. Well, what's the flip side though? All right, I'm sure that there's a couple of cases that you've already shared sort of a couple here. But what are some of the cases, or some of the people you've been able to help that you're most proud of, the feathers in your cap, so to speak, that you're most proud of when you go to bed at night? You have a beam on your face whenever you think about, man, that case just went amazing, or something. And maybe it was a case that you thought you were going to lose, and then you pulled out like the most amazing win, or people decided on your favor, the jury decided anyway, or whatnot. But what are a couple of your favorite wins in your legal career?
Well, I've untied some pretty bad, ugly knots in families. I represented a mother some years ago, and when she came into me, it was a mess. She had supervised visitation. The whole narrative was just draining down on her. She took my counsel. We worked through it, and we ended up her having a great relationship and equal time with her children. And that took some time to do, but she came in locked in a box, and I'm really happy that I had the grit to help her. And some of these severances that I've won, I'm deeply satisfied that those children have their mother. And there's more than one situation like that where children have their heritage, they have their mother, and those were not easy cases. And I could not have done it alone. I have a great team within my firm, and it takes a team. And I pride myself with being able to tackle some tough stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Professional, not on tire. There you go. Well, I appreciate your time, and we'll move towards wrapping this up here in a minute.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask you my two favorite questions that my listeners like to hear.
Okay.
And those questions, just to prime you for it, are going to be: A, if we can go back in time and meet a young DeeAn and give her some advice, maybe fresh out of law school, maybe even before she went into law school. What advice would you give yourself, and why? Other than, of course, the obvious, trust me, when it becomes a thing, buy a lot of Bitcoin and hold it. It'll sell at 60K. And then the other question, of course, is if I give you my pin. Now, this here, I'm not sponsored, but this pin is from the Spice Merchant, which is a lovely coffee shop in Wichita, Kansas. They sell great coffees. But this magical pen I found can actually strike laws from the books. It can edit laws that are on the books, or you can even add new laws from the books. So if I loan you my pen from the Spice Merchant in Wichita, Kansas, no shameless plug, just have good coffee. I don't get no endorsements here, no paid endorsement. If I loan you my pen, what law would you change and why? And it can be a big law with national sweeping ramifications, or it can be a little tiny law that forces you to fill out a form and triplicate 8 times a week, and it just drives you nuts. So think about that. While you do that, I'm going to jump back over here really quickly if I can find my screen share option. We're going to take another look at your website. This is GillespieShield.com. That's in the link below, GillespieShields.com. In Phoenix, you can call 602-870-9700. In Mesa, 480-985-4000. You can request a consultation right there on their website. They practice family law, employment law, civil law, criminal law, probate law, immigration law, and appellate law. And clearly, if you're running into a problem with federal law enforcement and or your children, I can definitely say it sounds like DeeAn has an amazing head on her shoulders and will be a great resource for you. Our final sponsor for the show today is my own company, Rank with News. If there was a guaranteed way to get your law firm or business featured in major national publications like Yahoo News, Forbes, Bloomberg, and other major 8-figure traffic sites, and then see those articles rank locally, sometimes in under 8 hours, for major competitive keywords that people were looking for, what else would you need to know? Rank with News is simply the most powerful way to hit page 1 in under 2 weeks, safely, organically, and permanently. This is guaranteed SEO, or search engine optimization, and it's on steroids, ranking quickly and sticking oftentimes indefinitely or for at least years and years. Visit rankwithnews.com or rankwith.news to learn more and to book a time to speak with a specialist, potentially even yours truly, about featuring your firm or business in major national 8-figure traffic sites that can launch you to page 1 in a matter of hours and help you dominate your local marketplace. Get media exposure, rank higher in Google, build credibility, win more customers, and earn more clients with rankwith.news. All righty. And we'll go ahead and jump back over here. All right. So, DeeAn, we time travel because this magical pen can throw us back in time. And we see a young DeeAn, fresh out of college, fresh out of Brigham Young, fresh maybe after having passed the bar. And you're able to really quickly give yourself just a couple of sentences of advice. What advice would you give to yourself and why? And of course, by extension, anyone else fresh out of law school.
I would probably say, don't be afraid to find a good mentor and ask them lots of questions and learn from them. I did reach out to a few people. I had a unique securities case, and I reached out to a gentleman who had a leading recent appellate case, and he was very gracious. I wish if I would have done that more in the family law realm too and built relationships. I kind of pulled myself up from my bootstraps in that area. But seek out mentors. I myself would be more than willing, and am more than willing, and do speak to young professionals. And professionals are willing to share what they've learned. Don't be afraid to reach out and ask for some mentorship. It's really can be very valuable.
Well, that is great advice and apparently a great offer. I wasn't expecting to get that. But if you're listening this far and you need a mentor, it sounds like DeeAn might be your gal. All right. So magic pen time. I'm going to give you my pen here, DeeAn, and you're going to take it through the magic of the internet. And now you can change one law. It can be a federal law, it can be a state law, it can be a local law, whatever it happens to be. What law are you going to change and why?
I'm going to change two, one state, one federal. In the state of Arizona, there's a really dumb thing. And when an order of protection is taken in the superior court and it involves a child and a parent and it's upheld, it now lasts for 2 years and nobody can change it. And those are quick hearings, and the standard of proof is really low. And we really need to change the law so that the family court judge I represented a father who was quarantined from his son for a year unfairly and unjustly, and the judge couldn't do anything about it. What did that do to that kid? So we need to fix that law so that when children are involved in orders of protection, whether it's at the lower level or the family court. I was able to help another father because it happened at a lower level and the family court could touch it. Why do we have a difference? So we need to allow the family court judges to deal with orders of protection when they involve children and parents. Just got to happen. That's the local one. The federal one, we need to abolish and or amend the Safe Families Act that gives state money for removing kids. It has had far-reaching, I want to use the word cancerous type things that have just really invaded families and turned upside down, because when you follow the money, it's not stewarded right and it's not done well. We have a case right now where some of that money goes to a children's hospital and to investigate medical abuse and other things. We are learning through our litigation that there's no accountability for those state dollars. What? Come on. Even though it's in the contract, there's supposed to be accountability. No, it's another. So they say there's not. It's another instance of just when you get in this magical land of child safety, there's no accountability, no rules apply because we're protecting children. We can do anything. And it's really dangerous. So I'd change the Safe Families Act, get it abolished, get it out of there. And that would be amazing.
Oh, that malignant bureaucracy.
Yeah.
Use that for your title. I want a nickel. So,
yeah, okay.
Well, DeeAn, thank you very much for taking time to talk with me and my listeners today. I do always like to give my guests the final word. I think you just imparted some great wisdom on us, but do you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
The best is yet to come.
Amen, sister. Amen.
All right.
Well, thank you very much, DeeAn. I really appreciate your time. As always, this is Justin West, and this is the Attorney Post. I've been chatting with DeeAn Gillespie Strub of the law firm that bears her name, Gillespie Shields. Link, as always, in the description down below. As always, though we do talk about a lot of different legal aspects on this podcast does not constitute legal advice. And if you have a legal issue, you should always seek the advice of a competent attorney in your area who focuses on the matter that you need help with. However, if you live in the Arizona area and you've got a family law issue, I can confidently say that DeeAn seems like she really has a great head on her shoulders and will be an amazing resource for you. And so I highly recommend at least reaching out and having an initial consultation with her firm. As always, again, link below in the description, GillespieShields.com. If you're watching this podcast on YouTube, we always appreciate a like, a subscribe, and a share. If you're listening on Apple, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or anywhere else you listen to your podcast, a rating, a star review, or whatever it is they let you do there is also always helpful. And just sharing this on social media. This particular podcast dealt with some pretty heavy topics. A lot of our podcasts do. Getting that information out there so people can learn from it is very, very important. So we do help and appreciate any help that you have in spreading this message. Until next time, this is Justin West with the Attorney Post reminding you, if you don't know your rights, you don't have any. Thanks for listening, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Jessica.